everyone, and welcome back to Founder Sessions. Joining me today is Nebula co-founder and CEO Dylan, who is also a very good friend of mine. Dylan, how are you doing?
Really good, thanks, Carl. Pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me on. And yeah, just really keen to chat today about kind of the story of setting up Nebula, answer any questions, and hopefully give some advice to anyone in the audience who's thinking of doing a similar thing or just wants some advice about early stage stuff.
Dylan, it's a little over a year ago we got together on another Google Meets call for our episode of the Purchase podcast, and I look back on that for like tips and things, and I don't want to ask the same questions again, that sort of thing. But one thing I noticed is that we looked like a very bad tribute band for the Beatles. The lockdown hair was very, very strong in that episode.
Thank God for the world opening up, so at least we can look slightly less like we're trying to impersonate a rock band.
I think we could pull it off. So Dylan, let's talk a bit about yourself. I think it's well documented now that you started developing apps way back when you were 13 years old. In 2021, you won an award. You become a tech champion. 13-year-old Dylan, did he even expect you to be recognized as a tech champion way back then? Just talk about that journey,
Yeah.
the feelings around that.
I have to say, being referred to as a tech champion is still really odd. You sound like my mum or something, but yeah, no, like it has been like a really amazing journey, but it's definitely not what I pictured at the start. In terms of like, it was literally just something I did for fun. Like, it was literally just something that I enjoyed doing really casually, and I didn't expect anyone to really pay attention to it, particularly when I was doing it in my bedroom at the age of 13. You put these things together and you put them on the internet and you think, oh, I'll be lucky if 10 people bother to look at this. And accidentally, some stuff got really popular, which kind of led to different stuff and more stuff, and then more conventional stuff like university, but doing startup stuff alongside it. And then eventually launching, obviously, Nebula Labs full time, and then various projects within that. So yeah, it's been a real journey. The next turn has always been really unexpected, I would say. So yeah.
It's always such an inspiring journey, because when we last spoke on a podcast, we were talking about like the very early project that you did and how it really took off in like Italy or something like that. Yeah, you need to write a book. It's all I'm trying to get to here. Is that you need to write a book.
I don't have the time, but one day.
There's your book title. I was too busy, but I did something anyway.
TLDW, too long didn't write.
First page did stuff, the end. Let's talk about your background with startups. Through this journey, you've kind of helped startups along the way. You work closely with Ignite as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I was on one of the Ignite programs in its earlier form when it was based in Campus North, which is just down to where I'm sitting now. When it was like a very hands-on, very in-person kind of program, which is a bit different to how it is these days. And then I've worked with some Ignite startups as like a freelancer or a consultant, or with Nebula, helping them build their product as well. And then now I'm an advisor, mentor at Ignite, so doing some mentoring sessions and just help people out more on the tech side than anything. But yeah,
it's really awesome to see that you're giving back, especially when you're very busy running your own business. Nebula, working with the likes of Metro and things like that. What have you learned from those experiences working alongside startups?
So I think, like, firstly, you've got to be in that mindset to help them out. And I think as even if you are a contractor or a service provider, you've got to be a bit more savvy and honest than that. You can't just go and try and sell them everything under the sun, because they probably can't afford it. It's probably not what they need if they can afford it. So you've got to be that bit more savvy and kind of, yes, you've got your own interests because you want to do some work with them, but ultimately you've got to have their interests at least on par with yours, I would say, if not, potentially ahead. Because as a contractor or a provider or a freelancer, you've always got other bigger, more established clients. But I think if you do go after the startup kind of market and want to help them out, you've got to be doing it more out of passion and more out of just wanting to help people out who might then become huge companies and still be a client one day. But ultimately, you've got to go in with the mindset of like wanting to help them out, potentially like coming away from a meeting and being like, literally, don't build that, or don't do that, or don't pay us to do that just yet. I think like that's kind of if it's that kind of relationship, that's the way you've got to go in. And then also in terms of like mentoring and just giving advice away from kind of professional services, I think it's really important to do that. Just because I think if people didn't, I personally wouldn't be where I am today, and loads of people who run businesses now that are fairly established and dare say fairly successful wouldn't be where they are today if it wasn't people given time back much earlier in their career, even if these people are incredibly busy and have their own gigs and their own kind of stuff to look at. Like you've got to fit that time in. You've got to ultimately try and do it for free, because people shouldn't be spending their money on startup consultants for advice. So you've ultimately got to try and find a bit of time. I would say every even just once a month to try and do a bit of mentoring or a bit of advice for free. And I think you've got to have that attitude. I know particularly the founders, I think I put it really well. They say like give first, and that attitude about like just go out there and be friendly, open your brain up, and just be honest and talk about potentially like where you failed in the past or where you've run wrong in the past or been challenged in the past, and just try and pass that on to someone so that they can either fail quicker or succeed quicker ultimately. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that honesty is such a big one. Personally speaking, when we first approached Nebula with the idea of Perch, it was that honesty that really stood out above the other software houses we were talking to. And I just think if you can get someone that's going to be level with you, whether it's a service provider, a mentor, investor, whatever, it's really gonna it's in your best interest, if that makes sense. It's like,
Yeah.
but your honesty back to me, it makes me think, oh well, I was thinking this way, Dylan said this, we've come to an agreement. I think just being honest with people, especially early stages, so important, because again, personally speaking, we've went down that rabbit hole of we think one way, but we're kind of blind to everyone else's feedback and honesty, and it's a good way you can be like, listen, I've done this.
Yeah, no, that's very complimentary feedback. Thanks, but yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's really important to go in like with that mindset on both sides. And the startup has to want to ultimately potentially be challenged and told that they're not right all the time, but the advisor or the mentor or the consultant or whatever it may be has to have that kind of wanting to challenge and wanting to ask questions, rather than just going in and just almost just complimenting the startup, or even worse, like almost treating it as like an order form and being like, yeah, you need that, I agree, you need that, without actually thinking like you might need that in 10 minutes time, but today you need this, and you might not even need me to put it together. So,
Yeah, being honest and being real with them is two things I really appreciate with people, because there just seems to be a lot of people, a lot of voices saying you need this, 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 and this. But if you get someone that says, listen, yeah, you do need this, but not right now, I think that's really,
yeah,
it's really
totally.
good.
I think like building on from that, like you've got to, as a startup, you've got to think about who you're speaking to, and you'll, like you say, you'll have 1,000 voices coming at you from various angles a lot of the time, and you've got to think about who you're speaking to, think about what their experience is, and they might have done something amazing, but in a totally different role to starting a startup, or they might have done an amazing startup, but in a totally different era or totally different vertical or something. So you've got to put everything into a bit of, I think, when you're taking advice, and you've got to ultimately, like, you can have as many brilliant advisors as you want, but you've got to know almost how to control that advice and how to apply that advice, which I think can be certainly like an element of the battle. But I think once you crack that, then it's great, because you can just get as much advice as you want, put everything into perspective, and then almost like filter it down like effectively like a marketing funnel, dare I say, to like deduce like the like the one line at the bottom or something. But yeah.
Should be a new phrase, shouldn't it? Your mental funnel. You've got loads of information coming in at the top, but what comes out at the bottom is hopefully the right path and what you need.
Yeah, I'm sure someone will start an AI startup to do that one day very soon. But yeah,
quickly write it down. So Dylan, again, from experience, you talk to a lot of non-technical founders. I'm very much non-technical founder. I feel like I asked a lot of silly questions early on. What sort of tips do you have for those non-technical founders? They maybe come into it with a different angle, more of a business angle. What tips do you have for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like going back to just what you said then, you asked lots of silly questions. No, you didn't. Like, you asked really good questions, because everything, when you're non-technical and you're trying to learn about tech stuff, is a really good question. But I think conversely to that, don't come in thinking that you, like, it's almost that fable of like a little bit of knowledge is more dangerous than the none at all. I think like there's sometimes non-technical founders like try to apply a little bit of knowledge and get themselves into a rabbit hole where if they just came in and said, look, I don't really know what I want, but I know the business really well, and I know my vertical really well, and describe that really well, and sort of look at the problem, look at the process, and then let technical expert, whether that even just be an advisor or whatever, fill in the blanks. I think that's like the best way to do it, because then both parties are playing to their strengths. Like it's not like a non-technical founder is trying to look technical to, I don't know, to appear more credible to investors or anything. There's no like you don't want to be doing that. You should focus on where your strengths are, and then find somebody, whether that be a person, a company, a mentor, whatever, who can fill in the blanks effectively. So I think like you say, like that's the best way to do it. And there's definitely no silly questions as a non-tech founder, but I think also like totally playing to your strengths and totally not trying to potentially learn to code fully just to try and develop your own MVP, when you could spend 12 months doing amazing business development and amazing kind of market research and amazing customer conversations instead. So I think like totally playing to your strengths, using your time to your advantage, filling in the gaps either with people who know what they're doing or tools and services. So there's so much no code and low code technology out there that you can spend maybe a few hours or a few days learning some of those tools and build something that lets you at least prove the concept before you approach someone technical. So I think like totally playing to your strengths, and maybe having some customer conversations, doing some validation, building something to then validate with, and then approaching someone technical to come in and be like, look, I've managed to build this. I don't really know how it works under the hood, but you will, and could you advise me how to make it properly, kind of thing.
I'm glad you brought up the no code stuff, because it has given the non-technical founders something to start with.
Yeah, and it's absolutely amazing in terms of like it gives you something tangible, and whether it even just be like a landing page of a call to action, or whether it be like a fully built out prototype that has some manual process behind it in Airtable or something. I think like the fact that people can now be doing that in a few hours or a couple of days is just absolutely phenomenal versus what you might have to have went to spend 6 months learning to code, or paying thousands to a development house or a developer previously. Even like even 3 or 4 years ago, that was still they were kind of almost the only two options. So like the rise of low code and no code in the past 3 or 4 years has been absolutely like transformational in terms of the approach that people could take, opening up so many doors, just like bringing more people in, making it more inclusive to try out ideas. And I think it's absolutely fantastic. And conversely, some people would be saying, but you work in software development, you might be saying this, but no, absolutely not, because like developers don't really want to spend the time solving the most repetitive problem that has now been successfully turned into effectively like a drag and drop app. So firstly, like that, and secondly, these people who are using low code and no code should absolutely not be paying you as a developer to do the stuff that is at the level that they need. It's the phase after that when you can come in and you can really come in as an expert and say, look, that was amazing for an MVP or a POC proof of concept, but hey, we need to throw it all out the window and we need to build it properly this way instead. And that's a much more like appropriate point for a like proper software engineer to come in at, I would say. But yeah.
My understanding is, a non-technical founder can start a no code, build that MVP, do some validation, maybe even raise, the first round, and then when they get that money in, then they progress into maybe coming to a Nebula, things like that. Is that how you see it? Sort of
yeah, exactly that. Yeah, so I think you can do so much validation and so much to raise investment, potentially get some first paying customers on something that is low code or no code that you've built in a few days or whatever, and then scaled out quite manually probably to your first few customers. And then you can look to do that investment raise and either bring in your own team in house or get a partnership with a development house, that kind of thing. I think that's like so much more the modern way of doing it versus essentially trying to raise money from nothing, or trying to almost like finance it yourself and never really getting to a version that's quite good enough, but you can afford. And yeah, it's a vicious circle otherwise. So yeah,
it's nice to see it like someone like yourself that is a software house. So you do develop apps, but then hearing you speak about no code, not just dismissing it, because I see a lot of software houses in the marketing kind of doing them versus no code, our pros, their cons sort of thing. But I think being a bit
I
accepting
think
of it, and
you've just got to be honest about it. And it goes back to that, like helping people out. Like you can be as negative as you want, but it's not going to help the person who wants to just try something really cool out but doesn't have the results to get you in. At the end of the day, in terms of time and money, like it's just not helpful. So of course you want to help that person out and you want to let them get as far as possible, and then approach you at the right time or do whatever they need to do in terms of bringing their own team in at the right time. So
yeah, no, it seems to be quite a rapidly growing space, and I think people are becoming a lot more aware of where it fits in sort of the journey.
massively, yeah. I'm really impressed. I've been kind of casually helping out a couple of potential startups with assessing like no-code low-code solutions recently, and it's not something that I'm an expert at myself, but I've just been incredibly impressed by the depth that I can get to now, and the amount of integrations that are out there, and the fact that you can potentially build something that you can bring on even a handful of paying customers to. Is just so powerful versus what was previously in the no code wheelhouse kind of 5 years ago of putting together supposed to be a landing page and a newsletter. Like that is there. This is a million miles in the better direction in terms of being able to build a version of the product, even if it's very manual and rudimentary and involves a lot of legwork behind the scenes from you as a founder. Like it's just so much more like impressive and so much more like tangible in terms of like you've actually built a product, even if you haven't had to like write on code, which is awesome. So, yeah.
It's a very exciting space to be in. Back onto Nebula. Let's give the people watching and listen a bit more information about what Nebula does. Maybe name drop some of them juicy clients you've been working with.
yeah, of course. The first one is obviously Purchase. So you're of a company, Carl. So we've done quite a lot of like MVP building and kind of just beyond MVP kind of stage building with you in terms of R&D and image recognition, which is really interesting. In terms of the more kind of enterprise and conventional space, we do a lot with North Tyneside Council, South Tyneside Council, looking at like solutions to help them out in terms of the North Tyneside, we do work on the tourism side of things, and on South Tyneside we do a lot of work in the social care space, so looking at like tech for good and how we can help people out who might need additional needs and additional help, or might be in the care system, for example. So really like tech for good stuff, which is really big social impact. We also do quite a lot with Tynemere Metro and Nexus, who run Tynemere Metro. So we work with them and Google to bring Popcard and smart ticketing to the Google Pay app. So that's been absolutely fantastic. As like a fairly small company in the Northeast, working with literally Google to do that on a tech level has been an absolutely wild experience, and probably something that like 13-year-old me would have been like just blown away by. And then we also do quite a lot in the health and fitness space. So we built Gym Plan initially, which is like a fitness training app. It's been Apple's app of the day a couple of times, and that spun out of an Ignite startup. So I worked with them personally quite a bit, and then we worked with them as Nebula to build that. Just an iOS fitness training app for gym users. It's got about 300,000 people across the world using it. So that's really kind of popular, and it's been amazing to see that scale from the first 300 to the first 300,000. And then more recently as well in the health and fitness space, we built our own personal training platform. So we built an app called Workit in partnership with a local trainer and influencer. So that allows people to sell digital workout training programs. So we built that during one of the many lockdowns. So I think in the sort of the early 2021 lockdown, I remember the days, we built that. So that was really cool, and that's up and running out as a marketplace. And then much more recently, we've built an elite sports coaching app. So it's called 1XP. And that's an incredibly fully featured app. So it does everything from like letting people like book lessons with coaches, pay for lessons with coaches, or to coaches either doing like a live stream and like a live lesson where you can like literally live stream a golf lesson. Your coach could be in America, but you could be in the UK, and your coach can watch you do it and can literally draw on the screen and annotate kind of what you're doing well and what you need to improve. and also like video annotation. We've got the ability to have like 2 videos side by side in it and use almost like a version of Photoshop on top of them to kind of draw on them and record yourself doing it, which has been phenomenally complicated to build, but absolutely incredible experience.
So many cool projects, and what I like about them is they're so varied.
Yeah, really, really diverse. And then like that's just, I don't want to talk too much about ourselves or our work on this because I don't want to speak too much about us. But yeah, we do like phenomenally varied in like so many different sectors. We've definitely got a few niches in terms of like transport and sports and fitness, which are 2 very far apart, but we just happen to have done a lot of work in the 2, which is really interesting. But yeah, just dead varied and like just really keen to keep working in those like kind of expert areas, but then keep on doing really out there stuff. So I would say Purchase quite out there in terms of like you came to us with a really grand vision, and helping to materialize that was totally like proper R&D. Like, will we get there? Will we not? So yeah,
Keeps you on your toes.
absolutely.
And what I love about your story, the Nebula story, is a lot of it is word of mouth marketing. A lot of your clients, it's just word of mouth. How have you achieved this? And how important is word of mouth for, smaller startups?
Yeah. So I think incredibly important, especially if you're working more on like projects or well, even for a product startup, it's still very important. And I think the way to achieve it is to, I think you've kind of got to be really into what you're doing to be able to be like passionate enough and be able to do work that's high quality, not only technically but high quality in terms of like thoughtfulness and innovation and like really putting yourself into the piece. So I think the first few projects that we did, we were really good at starting that off from the outset. Obviously, we do it today in every project we work on, but I think we were really good at getting that set up and getting really into the first few things we were building. So like being able to show that as a young company, I think is really important. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's particularly hard, but you do have to work on stuff that you like. So yeah, I think it's worth doing because A, you'll enjoy it more yourself, and B, you'll obviously like, I think the phrase is like turning customers into fans. So like how you can like almost like make your customers just want to talk about you because they've had a really good time or because they've found you really interesting to work with or really innovative or just really really good at getting the stuff out there. So yeah,
It's really cool to see. And because I think we've had this conversation before, I've asked you, as like, I've seen no adverts for Nebula anywhere yet. Everyone knows yourself, everyone knows Nebula. It's quite an awesome thing to see when I speak to someone new and they say, oh yeah, we outsource our project to Nebula Labs, and straight away they're like, oh, Dylan, I know Dylan, he's lovely. It's like, do you know how people say 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, how people can trace back to Kevin Bacon? It's like this for Dylan McKee.
well, I didn't expect to hear that this afternoon. But yeah, I think we don't do much conventional advertising at all. We give out stickers, and that's probably about it. But we do try to like keep ourselves kind of in the sector, even if it's just literally talking to people and literally just trying to help people out. So yeah.
And that moves on nicely to my next topic, which is the community, especially the startup community. You are a very key figure in the Northeast tech scene. How important is that community aspect to what you do? And for startups, for early stage startups, what tips would you give them to really get invested with their community?
Yeah, so I think it's hugely important. I think it's weird because we're now almost coming out of a bit of effectively a community recession due to COVID, where everyone has to obviously kind of shut down or go online or become a bit different. And now we're coming back to things being in person and people running events like your excellent startup grind event that we've been to a few times, that kind of thing. I think like it's great to see that coming back, but I think there has been a bit of a drought, and like it's really good to see people, and not the same people as before in some cases, actually going out there and putting on new events, which is absolutely fantastic. I think it's really important, like community. I think whether it just be even you talking to someone and you not being quite the right person for them to talk to at that stage, but you thinking, actually, that sounds really interesting. I know someone else who might be the right person to advise or might be the right person to make an intro to someone in their industry or something. I think there's just so much like serendipity and almost like making your own luck by being part of the community. Like ultimately it's benefiting you, but you have to give back to help other people as well. So it's everyone kind of giving recommendations that they know will be credible and will be helpful, and will be worth talking to. I think is incredibly powerful and really really helpful, and definitely helped us out when we were starting out. It's helped me out personally when I've been doing personal projects or whatever. So yeah, it's something that I'm really really passionate about, and I do try and get involved in as much as possible.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I keep saying to people, I'm fairly new to this, so I might not be a direct, customer to you, but essentially when you're meeting that person, you're buying into that network, aren't you? So it's like that network effect.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good attitude to have, because not everyone has to be able to help each other out when they meet them. It might be a startup that they might be doing something completely different to what they end up doing in a couple of years' time, and by the time they end up doing that, you might have followed them on Twitter or connected to LinkedIn or keep on bumping into them at networking events, and you might have been kind of following their progress. And by that point, you might think, oh, they weren't at that time appropriate, but oh my god, they are now, and I know loads of people I can introduce them to, or actually I've worked in that industry previously, or I've built something in that industry previously. I can give them loads of tech advice, that kind of thing. And that's happened to me a few times where I've been talking to founders where I haven't particularly, I found them nice people and I found them working on a good idea, but I haven't been an expert in their vertical or their idea or anything, so I haven't really been able to add very much myself. I've maybe made an introduction that has, but then I've followed their progress, and 6 months later they're working on something that's similar to something we've built previously, or something I've worked on previously, or just been interested in previously, and I'm able to kind of have a chat with them and actually be able to give some much more valuable advice. So I think like it is that, like, it's not like everyone has to be useful to each other when they meet them. It's just that kind of knowing of what other people are doing and just being a good person, trying to help them out, trying to make introductions. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of that long-term relationship, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's you might meet them one day, like you said, it might not be a fit or anything, but you've passed them on to someone else. They've connected, grown from there.
Yeah.
It's quite special to see as well when you look back and say, "Oh, that's because we met
Yeah.
here." And
It's absolutely amazing. And like, one of the things that has been fantastic for that, and why I think accelerator programs are really important, is like the cohort effect, and the people that I met during the Ignite program. I still stay in touch with quite a few of them today, and they still send us kind of potentially leads or interesting projects, and I send them interesting opportunities or projects depending on what they're up to. So I think it's really important to have that cohort effect, and like the tech community is fantastic for it. But if you need to take it to the next level, and potentially looking at like the cohort effect of an accelerator program is phenomenal as well.
yeah, it's really brilliant to see. And Dylan, what has surprised you the most about entrepreneurship? Is there anything that's come your way and you thought, "Oh, that's a bit different"?
Yeah, so I think this is really like, this is probably really kind of big picture, and looking at my whole journey from when I was really young, and you see these people and you think, oh, everyone's like is very hard nosed in business, when in fact, as we just touched on with the community chat, it should be at least the exact opposite, where everyone's very open and can take a bit of criticism, have a decent conversation, can constructively process criticism and constructively give out advice. And I think like the opposite of hard nosed is the best way to be in business. And I think that's what the tech startup community is generally really good at, in terms of being able to be that critical friend to each other, being able to just kind of help each other out. And even if you're technically in the same space and technically potentially even competitors on paper, you've still got to help people out. And we've had it with some of our what some people call competitors, and we do it again with some of what some people call our competitors, where if someone comes to us with a demand for a build but not in a technology we work in or something, or we're just too busy at the time, we're more than happy to hand it off to someone that we know is credible in the same space. So I think just almost turning the hard-nosed business person stereotype on its head is really important.
And I might sound a bit selfish, but I feel like the Northeast really do that really well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
yeah.
it's like a positive aspect of the community, and it's got to be encouraging. It's a good thing.
Yeah, because you see notable people in the tech scene doing great things, and maybe some people think, oh well, I can't speak to them. They're levels above me. But then you meet them at an event, you know, you're talking over a beer, and then that whole narrative of they're impossible to speak to is just gone, and they're just a person, and you're having some great chats. It's getting over that sort of fear as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the right way to approach it. I think, like, you know, if they genuinely think they're too big to speak to you, then they probably shouldn't be in the tech community, because, like, ultimately everyone has to try and help each other out. It might be that they're too busy to speak to you, which is a different matter. But, like, ultimately, like, no one should ever think they're too big to try and give someone else some advice. So yeah.
Dylan, what's been the best advice that you've been given, and sort of what advice would you like to give people today?
Probably a couple of things. So firstly, on the community front, like, the whole give first and give back is really important in my opinion. So, like, do try and make a bit of time, even if it's just, you know, an hour a month, to try and just attend an event, help people out, make some decent introductions, or just try and help in whatever way you can. And secondly, I think, like, if you're thinking of doing something, to actually just do it. So, like, even if it is just you spending half a day on a weekend putting together a low-code prototype for something and sticking out onto Twitter and saying, could you give me some feedback on this, something like that. If you've got an itch to scratch, do scratch it, because there's much more regret from not. So, like, ultimately, pursue something no matter how kind of small it is or how insignificant it feels at the time. I think, like, the fact that you've done something to pursue it is so much more important.
No, I agree on that side. I was just editing some past episodes, and that came up as well. It's like you might have so many ideas just in your head, but they're no good in your head. You need to either write them out, get them on paper, or then move on from that, you know, actually build something. It's like scratching that itch, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing more frustrating than watching someone, or even some big player, incorporate your idea into their app down the line or something. So I think, like, there's way more to regret from not trying it than to at least try it and be like, I tried it, it was absolutely terrible, and I wish I wish to never think about that idea again. Like, at least you know that you tried it to the best of your ability. So
to wrap it up, please just let the people know where they can connect with you, what they should check out. Just let them know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm DJ McKee on Twitter and Instagram. I'm not actually a DJ, just for disclaimer, for legal text. I have proper, like, dad dancing, so I'm absolutely not DJ. And I'm nebulalabs.co.uk for our website, and you can reach us through there. Or my email is dylan@nebulalabs.co.uk. I'm always happy to get a coffee somewhere in Newcastle and meet up and have a chat, if that would be helpful to anyone. Yeah.
This has been Founder Sessions. Thank you for jumping on the podcast with me today. Yeah, go check out Dylan. Have a conversation with Dylan. You simply won't regret it. I've been Carl. That's been Dylan. This has been Founder Sessions, and thank you.